This looks political from the outside. Let me tell you what it looks like as a practitioner. This is emotional. The president acted in a cowardly fashion. He's a coward.
What's going on here is an effort to cover up the facts.
This is something that is completely outside how American law is supposed to work. I mean, what kind of country is this?
Well, there was a run on Xanax supplies at CVS pharmacies throughout Washington over the last 2 days as the press absolutely melted down. The media committed to finding an illegal coup d'etat under their beds. Meanwhile, Anderson Cooper could not resist rolling his eyes, literally, at Kellyanne Conway, prompting her to denounce him as a sexist.
I face sexism a lot of times when I show up for interviews like that. Could you imagine rolling your eyes, having a male anchor on a network roll eyes at Hillary Clinton, at somebody, a female representative spokeswoman for President Obama or President Bill Clinton? I think not.
Charles Krauthammer is a syndicated columnist and author, and he joins us tonight. Charles, thanks a lot for coming on.
Pleasure.
So I don't think I don't think it's necessarily sexist. You can roll your eyes at men and women, and they can probably both handle it. But it does seem like in the last couple of days things have taken a turn in the way, the posture that the press assumes when it talks about Trump.
Look, the press we know has always been liberal, been anti-conservative. That is like the sun rising in the east.
Yes.
Trump is a special case. People seem to have a particular animus. You know, I say that as somebody who wasn't a fan of Trump, wasn't a supporter, but he's president.
Yeah.
And he deserves some respect. If you're an American, you want your country to succeed, and he's the president, constitutionally elected, and you want him to succeed. So it seems to me to follow. But there is a particular edge to the coverage, and it's as if the Comey episode, which is troubling in some ways, but for God's sake, it's not a constitutional crisis, has sort of set people over the edge to the point where they think there really are no journalistic limits or journalistic restraints, elementary ones like don't roll your eyes in the middle of an interview that ought to be observed.
What is it about? I mean, obviously you're a psychiatrist, but I don't want you to invoke your medical training to answer this. What's the common sense answer to the reaction to Trump? He's hardly the most conservative Republican we've ever elected. It's not ideological. There's something else about him that seems to drive the press insane.
Well, if you want to give this the best gloss, there's a question of fitness. I think people have a sense, some on the right as well, that he never reached the threshold of being fit for the presidency in terms of his knowledge, in terms of his temperament, in terms of his manner, sort of the way he treated some of the other candidates, the way that he insulted people. I think there's a lot about his persona that simply repels people, and that spills over into how they treat him journalistically, which I think ought not be the case.
What happens after this? When the Trump presidency ends at some point, we move into a new era, and we look around, and you really can't trust that any news organization, any of these news organizations, is telling you the unfiltered truth. What happens then? It's a different country.
Well, I've never thought that the press was telling the unfiltered truth.
Well, you're smart.
And I think things were worse 30, 40 years ago because the liberal press had a monopoly. And look, in 1980, 3 networks, a couple of major newspapers, the 2 news magazines, and yet Ronald Reagan won in a landslide. So it shows you that even though this is part of the landscape, the press will always be overwhelmingly liberal. You got to accept it, stop whining about it, because it's not going to change. I don't think it's a conspiracy. It's a kind of a self-selection process where the smart conservative kids start a business, smart liberal kids, you know, go into journalism and social work and other things. So I don't think it's a big conspiracy, but that's the way it was. Today you got Fox. You've got one page of the Wall Street Journal. You got talk radio. The monopoly has been broken. And I think for some liberals in the media, that's part of the reason why they go so much overboard. They can't stand the fact that they can't get away with murder because it'll be questioned.
That's right.
In those outposts, they're only outposts, still a tiny minority of the media outlets, but in an internet world with cable and with other outlets, they can't have the field of themselves, and that drives them crazy.
It really does. They hate that more than anything. Shocked. They don't like diversity. Charles Krauthammer, thank you.